Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so very happy to see all of you here with us this afternoon. And you know that these are really difficult times that we are living in. And, often you feel like the people in the room and the people online, you're speaking to the converted. But I think that the more we educate ourselves and the more we learn, the stronger we can become in our advocacy. So like Rushan said to us, I'm going to be talking a little bit about disability during a siege. But I thought, it's important for me to share a little bit about a personal statement first, because I think, often in academia, we tend to do things the academic way. And I think, I just want to get this off my chest so that I know that I've said what I needed to say. So I'm going to read it out. I despise the fact that 75 years and 6 months in, we are still needing to do this, that we're still needing to have these conversations. And that we're still needing to share images and statistics and to convince the world that this is really a huge problem. The evidence of the devastation is clear. I've had the privilege of being able to live and get to know just one Palestinian who's sitting in front here. And, on a very personal level. And so I've laughed with him and I've cried with him. And, every day my heart still breaks for him. And it breaks for all Palestinians because really this is not the way people should be living. The gross human rights violations is a disgrace. And it's a disgrace that oppressors are allowed to get away with what they're getting away with. And so I think that most of us feel the same way. All of us sitting in this room feel the same way. If not, I don't think we would have given up our time. And even if you don't feel the same way, I think that the mere fact that you are here is that you are open to hearing the stories and the experiences. So I don't know if all of you know, but the 3rd of December every year is normally International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And I've got some of the statistics on the screen here. 115,000 persons with disabilities in Palestine, and that was before the Israeli aggression on the Gaza Strip. And 2.1% of those people, that makes up 2.1% of the population. And in Gaza, approximately 58,000 persons live with disabilities, and that makes up 2.6% of the population in the Gaza Strip. Unfortunately, and we can understand why, the current and precise numbers of persons with disabilities is unknown. And it's estimated that up until December 2023, when this report was published, already 12,000 more people were disabled. So since an example of one form of disability is that since the 7th of October, more than 1,000 children are estimated to have lost limbs, and we've all been watching social media, and we know that often those amputations that needed to happen was done without anesthetic. So some of the key problems that people are experiencing currently are related to evacuation and safety. So on the screen here, I thought I would share this. This is Iman and a sister. And Iman uses sign language and a hearing device. She says, I don't have a hearing device, so I don't know when they're bombing. I can feel the vibration under my feet, and I see people running without knowing what is happening. So people with disabilities may have lost assistive devices. They don't have access to assistive devices any longer. And so I just want us to imagine for a minute that you're sitting in a space and you're unable to communicate, you're unable to hear, and there's just nothing in place to help to support you in these circumstances. This is a picture of Ala and his friend Harun. And so Ala is from Masafariyata, which is on the West Bank. And when we first met him, he told us the story about his friend Harun, who was preparing to be married soon. And soldiers had come in and shot Harun in the neck. And Harun was then subsequently quadriplegic for the rest of his life. Harun died in 2023 from his injuries and health-related consequences of being a quadriplegic. So Ala used to visit him regularly, and Ala was his physiotherapist. And similarly, the experiences on the West Bank and Gaza are exactly the same. People can't leave an area. They rely heavily on caregivers, and sometimes the caregivers are killed. And they don't have access to shelter. They don't have access to places of care. And as we all know, I mean, this is not new information to any of us. I mean, in the age of social media, it's, it's on our screens all the time. There's a shortage of medicine. And not because there's a shortage of medicine, but just because the Israelis are preventing the medicine and all the other necessary goods that need to come into Gaza. They're preventing that from coming in. So again, I just want you to think about this in relation to all of us who are sitting in the room. Some of us may have disabilities and some of us may not. But can you imagine that for a person with a disability, what a travesty this is actually not to be able to have access to equipment, not to have access to medical care, and not to have access to rehabilitation staff. I think I mentioned the previous one before that. More than 1,000 children already have lost their limbs in Gaza. And if you think about that, they don't have access to rehab. And actually what will happen now is that they will have a life of the burden of disability and the burden of disease. This for me, when I saw this was just broke my heart. And it's again a consequence of the destruction of the infrastructure and access to care. This is Umar Usama Abu Said, a young man who lost his eyesight. And you can see on the screen, he says, yeah, I want to see, it's my right to see. But he can't be evacuated from Gaza. He needs to be evacuated from Gaza, firstly, because there's no care. To be able to assist him with his eyesight and the health care that he needs for that. But he can't leave because everybody's movement is controlled. It's unsafe. And obviously the cost of seeking care overseas is huge, and people don't have the money to pay for that. And then my last slide before we hand over to Azim Badruddin is related to the mental health and psychosocial needs. Again, we get lots of our news from social media. Even the mainstream media is getting their news from social media. And we've all seen clips of the drones and the bombings and things like that. And you can just imagine how devastating it must be to live in a space where there's a constant bombardment. So people are not safe. The anxiety levels are profound and has an impact on people's mental and emotional well-being. And people with disabilities, and especially people with psychosocial and mental health related illnesses, are even more compromised during this period. And people need care and they don't have access to care. So finally, this is also a picture that Ala took, and this is a picture of his friend Harun Abu Aram. And finally, I just want to say that the impact of the ongoing aggression on persons with disabilities is significant. There are additional barriers for persons with disabilities, additional health risks, additional safety risks, and we need to think ahead. And if we don't do enough now, people will live with a lifetime of burden of disability and a lifetime of burden of disease and death. So it's very somber, but I think it's important for us to reflect on this and to actually, feel emotional about what's going on, because I think the lack of emotion, often is the problem, where we don't feel and care enough about our fellow human beings. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, Sumaya. I can't miss the opportunity as an occupational therapist to add a further comment to this. Is that, so while we're thinking about the burden, the lifetime of this burden of disability, from this point where people find themselves in situations of displacement, the lack of access to care that Sumaya's described, the lived experiences that they're going through and the trauma that they're experiencing is an ongoing trauma that will take a lifetime for people to work through. And so, the access to healthcare is an important part of this picture. But actually what this does for a collective, for the people in Gaza and for all of us witnessing it, is that it actually changes how it actually changes how we relate to one another as people, as humans in the world. And that when we're thinking about where the needs are and what we need to be doing, it means that we have to not only think about it in relation to healthcare, but also think about it in relation to everyday life and how health is meant to be a resource for life and how that is part of what's being taken away from persons with disability, and how, we speak about the environment being disabling, not just the impairment. And so we're seeing a very extreme version of that in this unfolding case of what's happening in Gaza. So then our next speaker is Professor Azim Badruddin, who's trying to convince me not to introduce him. So he's a professor of education and the director of the School of Education here at UCT. And his main areas of interest is in youth, race and criminalization in South Africa, looking specifically at how youth socialization in residential settings in South Africa and the links between how this influences vocational education provision, discipline, inequality, and poverty. He's also got interest in social welfare and crime within the educational discourse. Azim is also known for his work within the areas of teacher education, where he has explored how schools, post-school educational institutions, and aspects of the workplace are caught up in social inclusion and exclusion. And for those teachers who are in the room, you know how important this work is for what happens in the classroom every day. So today, Azim is going to be speaking to us not so much from the basic education perspective in schools, but actually when we think about that pipeline, what does that mean for higher education and the university context? And he's going to be sharing some of his reflections on how we think about the situation in Gaza and Palestine within the university context.
Good afternoon all. By the way, I'm just a filler. We are here to listen to Mansour. Right? And so the idea is that we don't want to detract from what we expecting to hear Mansour tell us. So I'm a filler until Mansour gets here. So I was initially meant to speak for 5 minutes, and they told me this morning, Mansour's coming, we're turning the program around, you have to say something more. I tried to write a few thoughts down. Firstly, welcome to the School of Education. This building we have for about 2 years now. And one of the first things we did when we entered the building was that we'd said that we'd like to make this building connect to the community. We'd like to fill it up with people from the community. So we've achieved that today. We have all of you here today from the community to have a discussion with us about something that's very important. We are in the midst of a huge humanitarian crisis. Really, we are. I think we're all here because we know that. I don't have to convince you about that. We know that. It's unprecedented. It's unspeakable. What's happening against women and children, and if I may say this, people skip over the main part as well. It's not violence and destruction. It's obliteration that's happening in Palestine at the moment. It's evisceration. And it's deeply concerning in the sense that there seems to be no intention to bring a peaceful end to this. Every element of what supports how we live on a daily basis is gone. Schools are gone, hospitals are gone, universities are gone, cultural artifacts is gone. Every public community involved in the development of a society has been obliterated. When the dust settles, as an educationist, the question that I ask is, where will the learners go? There are no schools. Who will teach them? Teachers are gone. They've either killed or detained. What are the futures of these learners? All universities have been destroyed. All the cultural artifacts have been destroyed. It really is a crisis of really immense destruction. So the question that we have to ask ourselves, is there a possibility of a future given this wanton destruction? Is it here? Many people speak about educaticide and scholasticide, and that the real intent of the Israeli forces is seen through this sides. They want to inflict conditions of life on the Palestinian people that completely and utterly destroys them. For them, it seems so at least, that there must be no more Palestinians by the time they're done. By the end of this genocide. When we speak about Palestine also, we use the word apartheid a lot. And yet, as a person that grew up under apartheid, we were not privy to or experienced this level of wanton destruction, where buildings were destroyed to the extent that they are, where there is complete rubble everywhere, where a child screams on the TV and looks at you, and I'm watching him, and he says, "Help me," and I sit helplessly and I can do absolutely nothing. We've never quite witnessed at the international level this kind of visibilized violence, where Palestinian families, women, children, look at us on a daily basis, and we can do nothing to say to them in return. We see their pain, and yet we see nothing is done. Never before in the history of my life, at least, have I had to see a horror unfold in the way that it has, and then get realized in real time. Never before have we seen human beings, other human beings, not never before, it has happened before, but not in the 21st century have we seen other human beings justify this level of senseless, wanton and murderous killing of others. It's of deep concern as educationalists, because we are at a world at crisis, but we're at a world at crisis with our own morality, with our sense of what we think the world needs to be, and more importantly, we're at war with our collective conscience. What do we do to end this? We don't know. So here at UCT, over the past, well, since throughout the time that I've been here, but especially in 2019, as academics, we've set about asking for, not asking, going into our different administrative centers, pushing for the boycott of Israeli institutions. And we've been doing that for a while. In 2019, we went into our Senate, and we were able to convince most of the senators to vote for a boycott of Israeli institutions. A few weeks later, a few months later actually, that was rescinded. It went up to our council, and our council said, what's the impact going to be on the university if we do this? Think again. Came back to Senate. We had a revote, and they voted against the boycott. That was in 2019. That was when things were not as bad as they are right now. We went into Senate recently, and we provided 3 motions. All of you that read the newspapers at the moment will have seen that one of the motions came before Senate. We voted. I don't like to say the word defeated. The motion was not passed. And I think that I want to hold on to those words for a minute. That within Senate, we have a host of challenges and interests that organizes how the universities across South Africa is run. And I think it's important that we ask questions at the moment about why not a single university in South Africa yet has pushed for a boycott of Israeli institutions. That ball is going to start rolling soon. And we were hoping that UCT would be one of the first to lead that momentum where all universities follow and we start saying to Israel, enough is enough, not in our name. You cannot in the world today do what you're doing and have us remain quiet. And so as a university, we went to Senate and provided these three motions. The motion, and why I'm mentioning this is because you would have seen it in the newspapers on the posters saying boycott, motion to boycott defeated at UCT. That's not completely true. I want to say this, that from 2019 till this year, more and more of our colleagues have stepped forward and said enough is enough. So the boycott was very, I mean, the vote in Senate was very tight. It was, as you all know, it was 75 against the motion, 60 for the motion, and 15 abstentions. 15, if you work on 15, then it could have been 75-75. But I do want to mention one thing, that when we sat in Senate and had a debate, there was a feeling in the room of the wanton destruction. You could feel it in the air of the meeting. It is when we step outside the emotion of the moment, and we had by the way, we had a vote online. And once we stepped outside of that space, that's when the vote took the shape that it did. But we have, what I wanted to also say, amongst us, we have colleagues that are not convinced yet that there's a genocide taking place in Palestine. We have colleagues that are not convinced yet that enough people have been killed in Palestine, that their land has been stolen, their livelihoods and their lives itself have been taken away. These members still believe that what happens in South Africa are still more important than what happens elsewhere. It is our job to convince them otherwise. But it's not the job of Senate to convince them only. UCT is not Senate. UCT is a collective of students, other staff members, academic staff members, and parents that send their children to UCT. And so it's important that we start seeing UCT as a place where in Senate we had a discussion. Now that the discussion has to move outside of Senate into the movement of the students and the movement of the parents. Parents have to start speaking up. Students have to start speaking up. We have to speak up. We have to get the momentum moving. Because in South Africa, we can sit idly by and we can watch what's happening. And we can go to marches, etc., etc. But we have to do the hard yards now. We have to get people together in this fight to say, not in our century. Because if we don't, then the Palestinian question is going to turn into a third world war. We should not only see the Palestinian question as something singular in the world today. This is going to turn into a far greater disaster. And it's in starting this debate right now and getting involved right now, thinking about our children, thinking about what we teach them, thinking about how we develop teachers that have different views of what social justice means, that we don't turn education into something that's packaged, that we don't turn education into something that like a pill that's going to solve all your problems, that education becomes something that turns human beings into social beings, into people that believe in a better world. That is ultimately what we try to do in our work at School of Education, but it is for us to do as a university. Higher education is ultimately not about the money. Because when Leanne asked me to give a title to my talk, I said to her, all those fancy academic titles that we come up with in the moment of someone asking us a question. And I said, UCT and the economization of loss. Because that is what's happening at the moment. What we've done, we've turned loss into, what will I lose in this discussion? How much money will we lose? What are the financial impact on the university system if this happens? It's an economization of loss, and we've turned what is deep emotion and was real human suffering, we've turned it into a debate about money. And that's across our country at the moment. Our government showed that you can go into the ICJ and you can make an argument that is not only based on all the other things, that is based on what our moral responsibility is. As South Africans, we haven't followed suit. It's time that we did. I'm speaking way too long. I'm waiting patiently for Mansour, hoping, please come in, please come in. So, as a university, as people, and there are many of us in the room here, academics that work in our different spaces, as Roshan, we, on a daily basis, we're trying to tell our students, our colleagues, our postgrad students, how to think about the different world. And all we are trying to do sometimes is to set up a world that we can't imagine anymore. Yeah. I should stop, right? I shouldn't speak beyond what I should say.
Thank you, Azim. So before we open up for queries, our plan is to open up for questions and discussion in a few moments while we're waiting for Mr. Mansour Shouman to arrive. But before we do that, we're going to take a few moments, like short moments, to give an opportunity for one of our Palestinian brothers who are with us today, Mr. Ala Hathaleen, who was in the pictures that you saw during Sumaya's talk. And Ala is a physiotherapist who is from Masafa Yatta village in the West Bank. And so he's just going to share a few words with us.
Hi everyone, I'm Ala Hathaleen, 24 years old, physiotherapist and activist. And again, I say both of them is not choice, because under occupation, you cannot choose whatever you want. I became activist after they declared my land as a military land and firing zone. I'm the most close one to the settlement in all Palestine. I'm just living 2 meters away from the settlement. And you can see the completely apartheid there, because the people talking about the apartheid just in South Africa, you can see the apartheid there's the farmer, which belong to the settlement, have electricity and water 24 hours. But we as a human, it's not allowed to us to have electricity and water. Okay. As I tell you, as a human, it's not allowed to us to take electricity and water. I grew up in the area without the basic needs. Yani I grew up, I'm living in tents and the caves, and I think all the world is living in tents as the caves like me. Actually, I'm one of the people. All the time I try to talk about my personal experience, because Dr. Rufat Arair, who was killed in Gaza by the occupations, he said the stories are also important for us as a Palestinian. As a people who live under occupations, story is very important, not because it makes us, and not because it shapes us, but the stories connect us with our past, connect us with our present, prepare us to the future. But sometimes we love the story more and more because it's about our homeland. And we love our homeland more and more because of the story. Because of that, all the time is to continue say, continue to tell more stories about Palestine. Don't stop talking about Palestine. In Palestine, it's enough to talk genocide or not genocide. It's still genocide, it's ethnic cleansing, it's occupations. It's enough to say it's complicated. It's not complicated, it's easy. And I would love from here to take the opportunity to thank South African people, because what they are doing for us, when all the people leave us alone, and all the people leave us alone in this genocide, in these occupations, South Africa take action. The people of South Africa take action to stop what's happening. The people of South Africa trying to help. And we feel that. As a Palestinian, I tell you, I came from Palestine in the end of January. All the Palestinians feel what the South Africa doing. All the Palestinians appreciate what the South Africa people do. And I will tell you, continue to do and continue working, continue protest, continue in demonstrations. Don't stop. Don't stop talking about Palestine, because in Palestine we believe that in South Africa you are the only brothers and sisters for us. And we believe that, and we all the time will be thankful and grateful for all the people in South Africa all of our life. As a Palestinian, I will all the time think about South Africa. It's our brothers and sisters, and the country who take action to stop the genocide against us. The country who be in the right side of the history. And all the time I continue to say, it's inevitable. The wall of the apartheid will collapse under the tides of the justice. It's inevitable. The songs of the freedom will ring from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. And inevitable that Palestine will be free. And you are in South Africa in the right side of history. And the history will remember you all the time. You are in the right side of the history, and you support the right side of the right side. And know all the people will remember that, and we will say thank you, South Africa. Thank you, South Africa. Thank you, South Africa.
Thank you, Allah. So before we open for the questions and the comments, we also just want to, it is Israel Apartheid Week. And so we want to give an opportunity for people who are in the audience to also just let others know about events that are happening within Cape Town this week. So if you are from an organization that is hosting another event this week, we'd like to give you a chance to speak to that now. Oh, yes, and then just to say that Mansour Shouman is on his way and he'll be here in the next few minutes. Oh, stuck in traffic. Okay.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Anthony. I'm part of a group called South African Jews for a Free Palestine. We have invited 2 young Palestinian activists to South Africa for the last week of March. They will be arriving tomorrow in Johannesburg for 4 days of programs, and then in Cape Town Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday next week. So good to give notice, because I know people make Easter weekend plans and all sorts of things. So let me just describe to you quickly something about them and then about the events that we're going to be running with them. Rawan Masri is working at the Palestinian Museum in Ramallah, and Fatih Nimir is a policy fellow at Al-Shabaka Palestinian Policy Institute, which to my knowledge is the only transnational Palestine policy network by Palestinians and for Palestinians. Together, the 2 of them have jointly created many years ago and continued to maintain a website called decolonizepalestine.com. That's with a Z, if you want to go find it, decolonize with a Z. And they will be, let's see, so Thursday, their first event here is actually going to be at this building. We don't know yet in which room in this building. If you want to follow up, you can speak to Leanne, who's sitting at the back. Most of you probably already know Leanne, I do. You could get added to the mailing list and you can get the follow-up information. But that will be a panel discussion including both Rawan and Fateh, and also Professor Mohamed Ayash, who is another Palestinian. He's a sociologist who's in Cape Town on sabbatical at the moment. You will have seen him at many events probably. his work focuses on movement building, and the three of them are going to be in discussion on the topic of infrastructure, decolonizing Palestine, infrastructure planning and resistance, which I know sounds very broad, but we're going to release more information closer to the time. Then on Friday evening, some of you may know we've been doing a series called Shabbat Against Genocide, often interfaith, often collaborations. This Friday is going to be a very special one. It's in George's Cathedral, 6 p.m. for 6:15. It will be Shabbat and Good Friday and Iftar, and so we'll have a program that includes all three of those segments, and it's open to anyone to join. And in addition to our Palestinian guests, there's also a group of 10 Christian Palestinians from Bethlehem and Ramallah who are going to be joining for the service, and will also speak to the experience there. So that'll be a powerful moment, I think, and space for building solidarity. We then have two events on Saturday, the 30th. The one is a youth workshop from 9 a.m. till 1 p.m. So it's mostly focused on young learners, teenage high school students and so on, but also anyone who's a teacher or involved in the education sector is welcome to attend that. And again, it will be with our guests to speak to the issue of Land Day, because that day, Saturday the 30th, is Palestinian Land Day. So it's got special significance. And then we'll run a workshop with whoever's in attendance. And again, everyone is welcome to join if you're interested in a youth workshop. And then later that day, also on Saturday, we have a spatial apartheid event, which will be at Sissi Gu House, which is in Woodstock. It's one of the occupations of Reclaim the City. And the idea there is to sort of connect different stories of spatial apartheid. One of the interesting things is that the occupation represents the bad guy in Israel, but over here the occupation is almost the name of the resistance when it comes to spatial apartheid. And so we're going to hopefully have engagement and dialogue along those issues and how we make sense of those kinds of things. Sorry, I've spoken very long. But also, if you just look at South African Jews for Free Palestine on Instagram, information about all of these events will be there. So easy to follow up and find that information, and you're welcome to also ask me.
Thank you. Are there any other announcements? Geoffrey?
Thank you very much. My name is Jamia from Palestine Solidarity Campaign. Two events that I want to alert you to if you don't yet know. In fact, this afternoon, after this event at Islamia College, Mansour will again speak, but there will also be a panel discussion including Zubaida Jaffer and Farid Sayed, and Atalia Atia is also a journalist, will moderate that. So that's this afternoon from 4 to 6 at Islamia College. And then tomorrow between 2 and 4 at AIDC, that is the Alternative Information Development Center and Observatory, there'll be an afternoon of poetry sharing and listening and this is a kind of a collaboration between the National Writers Association of South Africa and the General Union of Palestinian Writers, where there will be kind of cultural exchanges, open mic for sharing of reading and poetry and listening. So everybody's welcome to both of those events.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Amina. I'm a student in anthropology at UCT. I don't have announcements, but I have a request to get more information. A lot of friends and people are trying to leave Gaza at the moment because they don't want to risk their lives anymore. And we managed to help a brother who landed yesterday in South Africa. But we also know that 95% of asylum cases in South Africa are rejected. So if you have any information on how will Palestinians who are fleeing Gaza get refugee status or asylum status in South Africa, please reach out to me. It would be really nice to have a conversation because he's also a 21-year-old young man who's trying to rebuild his life and hopefully get his family here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so then we'll open up for your reflections, comments, perhaps questions or other thoughts.
Don't be shy. I'm going to direct my question to Prof. Badruddin and probably to Prof. Khalfan as well. Just something that, I've been thinking about a lot. I mean, we know that the universities have been destroyed. And in particular, the medical school has been destroyed. And I myself, I'm a pediatrician. I belong to Faculty of Health Sciences. And so at one of our advocacy meetings, where a small group of like-minded people were talking about this, there was thought about how we could possibly reach out as an institution to help medical students in Gaza. And I don't know if this has ever been brought up as a topic of conversation. Like is there a way that Faculty of Health Sciences can actually accommodate students? I mean, I just think about, for example, a final year medical student there who was maybe just a semester away from completing their studies, and they've had such an abrupt end to it. They're going to need doctors in the upcoming months and years. And so from my perspective, I'm obviously just talking about helping medical students finish their training. Azim obviously alluded to university education as a broader concept. Everything's come to a standstill. But I almost feel like if we can even just focus in small pockets, if one could reach out and somehow, even if you bring across the remaining group of final year medical students, and we can truly show our solidarity and assist these young students to finish their studies, so that they can go back and actually serve their people, because that's ultimately what's going to be required. Your comments.
So I think it's a really important point that you're raising in terms of possibilities for us to lend practical support. And I think it starts with having the conversation about what can we do, and if we ourselves can't be offering that directly, how can we support others to get that going? So I think we need to open up that group and those conversations and get together within the faculty and pursue that further. Thank you.
You shouldn't ask difficult questions. Okay, I've been saved by the bell.
Apologies for being late.
Sorry, do you mind standing in the middle so that the camera can catch you, please?
Okay, so we will return to that complex question in a little while. Okay. So Mansour, thank you so much for fitting us into your packed schedule. It really gives us great pleasure to have you in our company today, and for me to have the opportunity to introduce you. So Mr. Mansour Shouman was born in Jerusalem in the West Bank, grew up in the UAE, and studied and worked in Canada. An engineer by trade, he has degrees from the Universities of Calgary and Queen's in Canada. Mansour and his wife returned to Palestine 2 years ago. Upon visiting his wife's family, they decided to make Gaza their home. Since the start of Israel's devastating military occupation campaign against Gaza in October, he assisted journalists with translation and interpretation. In November 2023, Mansour's wife and 5 children were forced to flee Gaza for the United Arab Emirates. Mansour decided to stay. He stayed because he wanted to give voice to what was happening in Gaza. He stayed because of his commitment to the people and the land. Over the past few months, he has become known to many of us through social media and for reminding everyone that Gaza is not alone. And so he's reached millions through his daily social media updates. Taking refuge in Al Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, he provided first-hand experience of Israel's war crimes of targeting hospitals and civilians. He has also participated in many international engagements with media outlets, always spreading awareness about the systemic attack and anguish experienced by people in Gaza. So Mansour has come from one engagement to the next today, and we're really grateful that you managed to get here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. MashaAllah, it's an honor to be here. And looking at your faces, it takes me back to my time at Gaza. In Gaza, we have soldiers that do not appear on cameras. They are the true heroes. They are those who work in the medical profession, in the health industry, where most of the infrastructure have been destroyed by the Zionist forces. But despite all the challenges, the health professionals there never lost their values. They continued to work on saving lives. They continued to try to draw a smile on the children, on the elderly, on those with chronic diseases. These are the real heroes. Our doctors, our nurses, our administrators there in the north, in the middle region, and in the south. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them and bless you. I had the honor of speaking to several doctors who visited Gaza over the last few months. And I was speaking to Brother Munir here, and I would be more than happy to put you in touch with these doctors from around the world, because I heard that some of you are interested in visiting Gaza during these times and providing the aid to the people there, whether it be mentally, physically, physiologically, or elsewise. Gaza is not alone. With your support, we can continue to ensure that the people on the ground remain steadfast, that a repeat of 1948 and 1967 does not happen, that people there continue to be well fed, continue to have the nutrition that they need, and continue to get the political, economic, and social support from the outside world. I'm originally from Jerusalem. I've been a guest in Gaza for the last 2 years, and I haven't seen people with attributes like them all around the world. Any society after 6 months of going through what they're going through would collapse. However, despite a lack of governance, a lack of police presence, a lack of functioning hospitals, a lack of functioning judicial system, the people there are still caring for each other. The strong does not eat the weak. The elderly still has their rights and they oversee the activities of their communities. The children, the orphaned, are taken care of either by direct or extended families. Alhamdulillah, despite the challenges, God has brought down a sense of peace and tranquility on the people in Palestine, something which from a medical perspective, we cannot describe, we cannot define. Logically, it doesn't make sense, except it is something as part of the unseen, something that is truly divine. The people in Gaza want the world to know that they are resilient, that they remain steadfast on their land, that this is not only a battle for Gaza, this is a battle on behalf of all of the free world, and that they, with your support, with South Africa, with the stance of South Africans and its government and its people, have changed the course of history. Powers rise and fall. Right now, slowly we are witnessing a void internationally, and this void will have to be filled with something new, something that will support everyone, irrespective of their race, their creed, their background, whether they are weak or strong economically. Something has to change. And what is happening in Gaza, I think, is a precursor to that change. And we are all witnessing right now the political shift around the world. Unfortunately, how the world is set up right now, the weak do not be given the support that they need. The strong eats the weak. If you are foreseen, if you are thought of as weak and you will not win a certain war, you will be eaten alive. And the people in Gaza know that. Hence, it is important that we change the narrative. We show the positives, we show the strength, we show the resilience of the people in Gaza, the people in Palestine, the people in the West Bank. Because once these so-called people that are in power realize that, and they are realizing that, they will understand that we cannot defeat these people. That it is the Israelis, the Zionists, who are in the wrong. And that at the end, in the medium term, they will lose that battle. And to be on the right side of history, and to take care of their own futures, they need to side with the right, with the Palestinian people, as they strive for what is right for them. I've witnessed a lot in Gaza over the last 6 months. I've also seen miracles that cannot be described from a medical perspective. You know that after someone dies, the corpse has to become stiff. The blood stops to flow. The bodies start to decay. We've seen firsthand in my own eyes, bodies under the rubble after weeks, as if they are asleep, with blood still gushing through. When you carry them, their limbs are still moving, their knees, their necks, their elbows, and the smell of misk, a perfume smell coming out of the people's blood. When the Israelis bulldozed a lot of the graves in Nasser Hospital and Al-Shifa Hospital, a lot of bodies were taken out. And to their own surprise, their bodies didn't change. Their bodies didn't decompose. Their bodies as if they were asleep. As Muslims, we believe in this ayah. وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ. O you who believe, don't think of those who were killed while striving the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as dead. Alas, they are alive with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being given sustenance. Thank you all for the time taken listening, and I'm open to answering any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mansour. We really appreciate you being here with us today. I just need to tell the audience, and I don't think my husband's online, but this morning I was watching a little clip of yours, and he was about to leave. He's going to George, which is maybe 4 hours away. And I was watching your clip and I was crying, and I greeted him, and he thought I was crying for him. But I was actually crying for you. So I think everybody in the audience, we're all very, Yasir, sorry, I was crying for you. So everybody in the audience, I think we really just, we're very happy that you're here with us, and we want to thank you for all the work that you've done. So we're just going to open it up to the audience, and if there are any comments or questions, people, this is your opportunity. Can we give it to the gentleman at the back? He had a question earlier. Go ahead.
Comrade Mansour, if I can may call you comrade, I have a big question, but it's a politically involved question. I've been to Lebanon 3 times, and I've met Palestinians in Lebanon, at Shatila refugee camp and elsewhere. I also have been to the Bekaa Valley. And in the Bekaa Valley, you will know that, that the Palestinians, the PLO at that time, fought with the PKK. PKK is a Kurdish communist workers group. And they fought with them. They actually trained some of the PKK. And then when Israel, they were training the PKK, they were supposed to go back to Turkey. But then Israel invaded, and the PKK decided to stay and fight with the PLO against the Israeli invaders. One of the things that I'm puzzled about is that since that time of a close bond, there's been a separation. There doesn't seem to be much, you might know better, but there doesn't seem to be much of a contact between the PKK and what's left of the PLO. And maybe you could throw some light on that.
Thank you for your question. I would have loved to answer it, but I'm not part of any political party. I don't have any connections with the PLO or the PKK. So I'm really, I don't know what happened to the relationship there. And I don't know if there is any existing relationship right now. I honestly, I don't know. I'm really sorry, doctor.
Thank you. There's a question at the back.
Please take your time, inshallah. We'll answer all the questions.
Good afternoon, everybody. Comment on some question. I've seen a hideous video this morning of the Americans' Middle forces bulldozing and creating a jet, and what they're taking is the rubble, which is mixed with bodies or parts of bodies, which they are dumping to form a sort of jetty for supposed to be a supply of food or some sort. I've been told that sometimes burials are only parts of limbs. That's the first question. Has there been any uproar? I don't know. I haven't seen any international uproar on that matter of what they're doing. People are saying, well, at least the Americans are trying to assist. Besides the question of gas exploration in that area, which is another element. That's the first thing. The second thing I wanted to ask is, you continually hear the argument of Zionists that we and the Americans and Western Europeans outside the Spanish and others saying that the Israelis have a right to defense. But the Chinese have raised the other side of the coin. If the Israelis had been mowing the lawn, that is massacring Palestinians over a long period of time, have the Palestinians a right to defense? If they have a right to self-defense, they can't be called terrorists. What took place in the 7th is exactly what has been taking place all the time, which was not regarded as terrorism. And if you call Hamas a terrorist organization, then you have to call Israel a terrorist state, because that's what they're doing exactly, if that is the kind of definition of terrorism. But funnily enough, all the journalists and people that argue, the normal way was, do you, the first question in all the earlier interviews is, do you feel that you should show that what they did on the 7th was terrorism, and do you condemn it? And every single person is interviewed, do you condemn it? But nobody says, do you condemn what the mowing of the lawn that has been taking place? So I think it's very important. The war will be won in the court of public opinion. Israel is the fourth, and they'll be armed by the Americans and continue, and then the Germans will send stuff in and so on. So the question I'm asking, and I think that's very important, that the court of public opinion is shaped by the arguments that have been put forward, and the Zionist lobby has been spending a lot of resources to kind of change it on its head. So I just wanted to ask you, what are journalists doing about that in particular? I'm sorry I'm so long. I'll be leaving now. I'm going to my brother's funeral. I'm on my way, but I show my commitment. I've been with Al-Aqsa and the Palestinian group for over 30 years. And I think it's important that we are showing our commitment in practice and not in words. Thank you.
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept your brother in the highest level of paradise. My deepest condolences to you. With regards to the first question, we've seen videos online, and I've also seen what you're talking about, where they have hundreds of bulldozers all around Gaza Strip, and they've removed the pavements from the streets and from the sidewalks. They've bulldozed houses, they've bulldozed hospitals, clinics. I mean, these Caterpillar D19 have really done a lot of damage. Before I went missing the second time, I actually encountered them firsthand at Nasser Hospital while they were bulldozing the northern section and the southern section, trying to slowly collapse towards the people living there. And it's a horrid sight. And I've seen firsthand how, like you said, you saw the bodies and the sand and the rubble and the rocks, together while they're being bulldozed. But there's a saying in Arabic, that the sheep once slaughtered, it doesn't feel the effects of its skin or it being cut. Alhamdulillah, those people who have been killed, their souls are with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inshallah, they are in a better place than where they are right now. This is just further evidence of the Zionist mentality, thinking that they are the chosen ones, that they are higher above anyone else, that whatever they do, they're going to be forgiven for, and they're actually going to be rewarded for it, thinking that we are all below them. With regards to your second point about public opinion, I think that this war is being tackled on a lot of parallel fronts. And one of the most important ones is public opinion, is journalism, is social media. And this is one of the reasons that after the first week of the war, I was asked to help out with the English side of the news as a civilian journalist in Nasser Hospital with the big teams there. And I remember doing my first interview with Al Jazeera, and where I talked about the suffering of the Palestinians on the ground. And I showed them examples of, children being, our children, Palestinian children actually the ones beheaded, not Israeli children beheaded. That Palestinian woman being hurt, not Israeli women being raped. And that at that time, I remember the propaganda was very strong that, Palestinians were animals, they were like ISIS, they all need to be eliminated. And subhanAllah, slowly, however, we've seen this different shift in public opinion. And if you do some polling on social media, you will see that over 85% are now pro-Palestinian, versus this was never before the case in earlier wars between Israel and Palestine. Let's talk about October 7th for a little bit. It's very important to educate ourselves and everyone that this didn't start on October the 7th. This started many, many, many decades ago. And to be fair, in any assessment of any situation, you need to study history. You need to study the events that led to October the 7th, right? So we are talking about millions of people that have been forcibly displaced from their homelands, many hundreds of thousands killed, many $billions of property that have been taken away from its rightful owners, land that continually is being taken in as settlements in the West Bank and around Gaza. Even the United Nations recognizes that these are illegal settlements and recognizes that Israel is an occupying force. So from a purely political term, yes, I agree with you. This is not terrorism. This is resistance. And what the state of Israel doing is terrorism on its own. And if we look at what the H group did on October the 7th, they took around 200 prisoners in, for example, right? Israel every day is taking hundreds of prisoners in the West Bank, right? And no one talks about that. Israel in its prison right now has thousands of political women, children and men taken held as prisoners. No one is raising their voices about them. Israel every day is killing over 100 civilians in Gaza. Until now, we have over 100,000 that are either injured, under the rubble, or killed. So we are seeing this. They're trying to make the public opinion all about the 150 Israeli prisoners that are in Gaza, whereas if you look at the numbers, it is not a fair comparison at all. And even if you look at when the prisoners were released, look at how the public opinion changed then. Look at how the Israeli prisoners were treated. Look at how they showed the media how they were in their full health, fully taken care of. Look at the videos that are coming now of the current Israeli prisoners asking for mercy from their government, asking their government not to bomb them, asking their government, please, we want to return to our homes alive. They are feeding us from what they're eating. They are giving us medication from whatever they're giving medication to their own people. But you are targeting us. You are killing us. This is the message of their own people, that are their own prisoners. So if that's the mentality of Zionism, using the Hannibal Directive as a means to ensure that no evidence is left behind, even if it's their own Israeli soldiers, then think of what they're doing, not only to Palestinians, but to the different countries and world orders that they control directly or indirectly. And I think you can see some of their effects here in South Africa as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we're gonna take one question from the folks online.
Okay, so there's two questions, Mansour. So the first question is from Leonard. So greetings, Mansour. How specifically can we contribute to the rebuilding of Gaza and occupied West Bank in terms of healthcare infrastructure once Palestine is free again? And then the second question is from Naila Pandi. What can we really do to help make a difference from all the way over here? Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. So if you are interested to go to Gaza, I've given Brother Munir, who's been my host and facilitator in this tour, the number of a Canadian doctor who is more than willing to help assist any person here who wants to go to Gaza to help the people there through an official tour directed by the WHO. So this is something you can do right now immediately. In order for us to do constructive rebuilding of Gaza, there has to be a permanent ceasefire. As long as the war continues there, like I tried, for example, building 10 cities. We actually assisted with over $200,000 in building several field hospitals in Gaza through charity work and support by people like you all around the world. But unfortunately, as long as there's a threat of the Israelis bombing the area and bulldozing that area, we fear that, you know, these efforts will be not the best right now. So we need to demand an immediate permanent ceasefire. We need to demand, all of us, that they open the Rafah borders to allow the thousands of trucks of aid to come in, including a lot of medications that are needed for chronic diseases. You can continue to boycott Zionist corporations. You can continue to donate wisely. You can continue to demonstrate on the ground. You can continue to lobby your governments. You can continue to learn more about the history of the Palestinian and Israeli conflict, about what Zionism is, and learn more about what Islam is all about. Because if you understand Islam, you will understand why the Palestinian on the ground there is remaining steadfast and resilient despite everything that is thrown at them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We've got one more question, and from Firoza in front. And then we just need to keep track of time because Mansour needs to leave soon.
Okay, I'll keep it short. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your experiences with us. And I mean, as healthcare workers, we share the pain of journalists in terms of we're not a target, and we all have been targeted, and a lot of us were following your journey. And during the time that you went missing, we felt it, we prayed for you, and were ecstatic when you were found alive. We were wondering if you would be willing to just share a little bit about that time when you went missing. Who were the wonderful people who sheltered you? You know, what was that experience like? And, you know, just generally trying to be a journalist and bringing the truth to people in Gaza.
Thank you. I went missing twice. The first time was, and when we say missing, it means I wasn't on social media. I didn't have access to internet. The first time was we were after praying dawn prayer, we went to visit one of our projects that we were working on in the west of Khan Yunis in the refugee camp, and we were surprised to see that the Israeli forces had made a 180-degree turn from the south of Khan Yunis, from its eastern side to its western side, and we were, with the people there. We saw people started to flee the area, and we understood that, tanks were approaching, snipers were taking on buildings. We started seeing quadcopters and drones in the area. It was a war zone. So we were surprised, and we had to take cover in the refugee camp in Khan Yunis. And we slowly tried to make our way back to Nasser Hospital, back to safety. And we remained in different homes with different civilians on the ground who were kind enough to take us in and ensure that we are safe, despite being surrounded by a lot of dangerous activities that were happening. Some of our friends were martyred, some were injured, some families we lost track of after that. We just made our way through from house to house until we were able, after 2 weeks, to reach Nasser Hospital. The second time was when the Israeli forces entered Nasser Hospital. A day before, we sat with delegations from the UN, from the WHO, who communicated to us, telling us that Nasser Hospital was a safe area together with the 4 schools around us, and that we had 40 to 50,000 refugees. And we also were going to take in a Canadian doctor delegation that was coming on February the 12th. So people there felt relatively safe. However, we were shocked when, after sunrise, the Israelis started to bulldoze Nasser Hospital from both ends. And we made a decision to leave everything behind and to try to escape that area, because no one wants to be humiliated by the IDF and take chances of us getting rid of our clothes and putting us into all sorts of torture. So same thing, similar to what happened before, but this time we were traveling through the ruins of Khan Yunis. And there's a lot to be said about what happened during these 2 weeks and the last 2 weeks. But something that I can tell you is that we witnessed a lot of miracles, a lot of things that we could not, with our own logical sense, describe. I'll give you examples. I remember being in certain houses where if the soldiers just turned their heads and looked through the windows, they would have seen us. But they always kept saying something. This house behind us is in complete ruins. There's no need to waste our time there. I remember that at one point, in the first time I went missing, we were in one building that wasn't bombed, and the building around us were bombed. And we thought that that's it. I mean, we were going to get bombed because that area was being carpet bombed by the F-16s, and they were being overrun by tanks. So we said our Shahada, we said La ilaha illallah, and then we suddenly saw 3 men in white. They told us, what are you doing here? This is not safe. Come and sit under the stairwell in the basement. So we just listened to these men, and we went there and we sat under the stairwell, and then alas, the building was bombed to the ground. But the only place that remained untouched was the place that we were in that basement. And a few hours later, we made ourselves out, alhamdulillah, and we went to another place. I remember the story of another brother who was a 19-year-old child who was, beforehand known as someone who caused a lot of trouble in the area. But subhanAllah, once October the 7th came, he became closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he started praying with us. He started fasting with us on a daily basis, doing his nighttime prayer, serving the brothers and sisters wherever he can. At one point, he went out looking for food, and he didn't come back. We thought he was seeking refuge at one of the houses because of the situation. However, he still was missing. So we went looking for him, and we found him on a street laying with his head held up and blood gushing from his heart area. We saw that a sniper had took him out. We went to see him, and his skin was tan colored. But when we saw his face, it was completely white. And that face that was full of razor marks was completely smooth as well. And the smell of his blood was musk, was perfume. So we took him, we carried him, and we put him on the sidewalk. And we asked Allah that this is a sign that he has accepted this brother as a martyr. When we turned away and started walking, we started hearing the flapping of a bird. And when we turned around, we saw this huge white bird walking close to the corpse of that brother. We thought it was a turkey because that was the biggest bird in Gaza. However, that bird slowly opened its feathers like this, and then just covered the whole corpse of the brother. And we realized that no, this wasn't a turkey. This was a white peacock, a white peacock. And I asked them, do you have peacocks in Gaza? They're like, no, we don't even have normal peacocks. Like, where did this peacock come from? And then that peacock turned around and sat and looked at us. And we were in awe, just watching the scene, like not knowing what to say. A few seconds later, that peacock strutted into an alleyway. We went to try and find it. We couldn't see it anymore. So these are ways in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues to ensure that the people on the ground know that they are not alone, that there is a whole world of unseen around us, and that the physical way that the world is controlled is not only by things that we see and sense. There are things in the metaphysical world out there that we need to be aware of, and that there is life after death, and that before we were here, we were somewhere else. So it is important to reflect amongst our medical community as well, and to try to combine both the medical physical field with the metaphysical ones, with the teachings of the Quran and the Sunnah.
Thank you very much, Mansour. We just wanted to read a little poem quickly before you left, and then or with you. Do you want to do? Thank you. Okay. Mansour, before we read the poem, we rather just going to thank you first. I think that everybody. You know, we're really grateful that you took the time to come and talk to us this afternoon. And as you were speaking, I know I got goosebumps listening to especially the miracles that you had witnessed. And we continue to pray that you're protected on your journey, and that wherever you go, people take your words to heart, and that you make a difference and you influence people to support the cause. So thank you very much for your sacrifices that you've made, and thank you for bringing the stories about the people in Gaza to the world. We really appreciate it. We've got some few gifts for you and for your family that you can take home with you, and please share this with your children and your wife. And thank you very much.
Jazakumullah khair. Thank you all. It's an honor to be here. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. So the poem is on the screen here. And we'd appreciate it, you know, if people want to join in to read the poem with us. This is a poem. Is the poem now? Poem disappeared.
It's okay. Let's read it together, inshallah.
Yeah. So I don't know if do you want to lead us in the poem?
Sure. Do you want us to in unison or?
Yes, we're going to do it in unison. Yes.
Okay. So after 1, 2, 3. If I must die, you must live to tell my story, to sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth and some strings. Make it white with a long tail, so that a child somewhere in Gaza, while looking heaven in the eye, awaiting his dad who left in a blaze, and bid no one farewell, not even to his flesh, not even to himself, sees the kite, my kite you made, flying up above, and thinks for a moment an angel is there, bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope, let it be a tale.